Welcome back to Saxon Math. This is lesson 119, finding a whole when a percent is known. We have solved problems like the following using a ratio box. In this lesson, we will practice writing equations to help us to solve these problems. 30% of the football fans in the stadium are waving team banners. There are 150 football fans waving banners. How many football fans are in the stadium in all? The above statement tells us that 30% of the fans are waving banners and that the number is 150. We will write an equation using T to stand for the total number of fans. So if you have 30% of the fans are waving banners, you know that 30%, the word of meaning times, we don't know the number of fans in the stadium, so we're going to use the letter T for that. R is the same as equals, and then we know that there are exactly 150 people waving banners. We are told that 30% are waving banners and that 150 of those people are waving banners. So these two are like the same. They're considered the same amount. So 30% of times the number of total fans in the stadium equals those waving the banners. Now we can change 30% to a fraction or to a decimal. For this problem, we choose to write 30% as a decimal. So if you have 30% as a decimal, it is 3/10 times t, which is simply 3/10 t. That means you're multiplying these two variables, equals 150. Now we find t by dividing 150 by 3/10, because if you had 3/10 times t equals 150, you can get t by itself by dividing by 3/10. What's 3/10 divided by 3/10? 1. If this says it's equal, you have to do the same thing to the other side so that it remains equal. The equation is still equal as long as we do the exact same thing to both sides of the equation. So because we wanted to isolate t is now equal to 150 divided by 3/10. When you do that, you move the decimal over to the wall here and you end up with 1500, because 150, you have to move the decimal one place over here as well. So 1500 divided by 3 is 500. So that we now found that 500 fans were in the stadium in total. And you can use that model to represent the problem. The total fans, if you've got 150 being the part of those who waved banners, and this represents the number who did not wave banners, all told, there would be 500 people in each. So you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts to that, because we're talking about percentage here and it's 30%. So 3 parts of those. Each part has 10% in it. So if you had 150 fans divided by 30%, which is the same as 3/10, you see that t equals 500, and that would be the total number. Now you could also find the number of those who did not wave banners, but that's not what the question asked. The question simply asked how many are in the stadium, how many fans. Example 1, 30% of what number is 20? Find the answer by writing and solving an equation. Model the problem with a sketch. To translate the question into an equation, we translate the word of into a multiplication sign and the word is into an equal sign. For the words what number, we write the letter n. So 30% of what number is 120 looks like this. 30% times n equals 120. We may choose to change 30% to a fraction or a decimal number. We choose the decimal form. So in this case, 30% is also 3/10 times n equals 120. Now we find n by dividing 120 by 3/10, or 30%, which is 400. So 30% of 400 is 120. We were given the part 30%, which is 120, so we know that, and we were asked for the whole. Since 30% is 3/10, 3/10 as a fraction, you know that there's 10 equal parts. Each of those equal parts has 10% inside of it. Now we know that if we had 10 parts, and each one of those, in this case, you see that 10%, you could have it broken down into each of those parts being equal to 40. But that's not the question it's asking. It's asking, what is the number when you have 30% of that number equaling 120? Example 2, 16 is 25% of what number? Solve with an equation and model with a sketch. So we can translate the question into an equation using an equal sign for is, multiplication sign for of, and a letter for what number? Any letter of the alphabet. So n equals, 16 equals 25% times n, because 16 is 25% times, which is what of is, and the unknown. Because of the way the question is asked, the numbers are in opposite sides of the equal sign as compared to example 1. We can solve the equation in this form, or we can rearrange the equation. Either form of the equation may be used. So if you wanted to do it this way or that way, it wouldn't make a difference. We'll use the first form of the equation and change 25% to the fraction 1/4. So 16 equals 1/4 times n. 1/4 is 25%. Then we find n by dividing 16 by 1/4. 16 divided by 1/4 is equal to 16 over 1 times the reciprocal of 1/4, 4 over 1, which then would translate into 64 over 1, because 16 times 4 equals 64. So 16 is 25% of 64, and we are given a part and asked for the whole. So you can see that since 25% is 1/4, we can model 100% with 4 sections of 25%. All right, let's try some of these. We've got some practice problems here. Letter A, 20% of what number is 120? So here we go again, 20% as a decimal. Let me just start with that. 20% of, so that's multiplied. What number, let me just use the letter W, equals 120. And because x can get confused as a variable sometimes, we want to write this like this. 20%, which is 2/10, W equals 120. We normally do not want to write x as, your multiplication symbol as an x, because it could be confused in algebra. So let's do this now. We've got 20% divided by 20% equals 1. We have to do the same thing to this side. So now you have 120 divided by 20%. And if I move the decimal up against the wall here, I've got to move this decimal over, throw a 0 in, decimal comes straight up in the answer. I now have 1200 divided by 2. I know what that is. I know it as 600, so W equals 600 in this case. So the number we're looking for, 600. And let's do letter B. So if I have 50% of what number is 30? So again, 50% as a decimal of what number, I'm going to use W again, is 30. Is the equal sign 30. So now I have, this will end up being 30 divided by 50%, which is the same as, and if I move the decimal over here, this would be 300 divided by 5, which I know as to be 60. So in this case, 50% of 60 is 30. And you might think about that. for a second and realize you would have known the answer to that long ago just from knowing what half of 60 is. Let's do letter C. Let's do that one right here. 25% of what number is 12? So 25% could be as a decimal, looks like this. Of what number? I'm going to put W. Remember, it's of, so it's saying times what number. And there's the is word, which means equals 12. So I think I'm going to convert this one into a fraction because those would be more compatible numbers in this case. 12 and 25 hundredths are not so compatible. So I'm going to say 1/4 times W equals 12. And those numbers look a little more manageable to me. So this is divided by 1/4. 1/4 divided by 1/4 would be 1. 12 divided by 1/4 is the same as 12 times the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 12 times 4, which ends up being 48. So that means the answer to this one would be 48. And letter D. 20 is, so I need to start with 20, and it equals 10%, which is as a decimal like this. 10% of what number? I'm going to use W again, simply. It could be any letter of the alphabet. I just like to use W because they're saying what number. So 20 equals 10% of what number? I need to divide by 1/10. So now W is by itself on this side, and this side would be 20 divided by 1/10. So I have, in this case, 20 divided by 1/10. And I need to move the decimal over on this one up against the wall. And that means I need to move the decimal over here and add a 0 in there. It's 200 divided by 1. So that means W will equal 200 in this case. So that's what I need to put for the answer. 200 would be my choice. And letter E. All right, so for letter E, 12 is 100% of what number? So again, 12 is 100% of what number? So that would be like this. 12 is 100%. What's 100% as a decimal? 1. Look at that. It looks like we're pretty much done here because 1 divided by 1 is that. 12 divided by 1 is that. So that means W has to equal 12. Almost like a trick question, isn't it? So 12 is 100% of 12. That one was probably something you probably figured out long before you did the math behind it. Letter F. 15 is 15% of what number? So I need to put 15 equals, this would be 15% as a decimal. And then I'm going to divide that by 15 hundredths. I'm going to divide this side by 15 hundredths. Now I have W equals 15 divided by 15 hundredths. And 15 divided by 15 hundredths. If I move the decimal over 2 places to the right, I've got to move it over 2 places to the right here, throw in a couple zeros. So that's 1500 divided by 15. That would be 100. So my answer for this one would be 100. And then letter G, write and solve a word problem for the equation below. So in this case, you might simply have written, if you've got 15% times an unknown equals 12, the word problem might simply be 15% of, so that, remember this is of, so we're just kind of working backwards here. So we've got 15% of what number, and then we've got an equal sign there, is 12. So that would be our word problem for letter G. Okay, excellent work. Make sure you guys do written practice 1 through 30 again. We're down to the last lesson, lesson 120 tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.